Hello and welcome to Total IELTS. Peter here, and in the next one in the series of mistakes to avoid, I'll be looking at the IELTS Listening Test, 5 mistakes to avoid. Avoiding these mistakes will greatly increase your band score. So before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and best of luck with your IELTS test. So let's kick off with number 1, and that is not being aware of distractors. For those of you who've taken the test or practicing it, you'll know that distractors are a common IELTS listening trap. And this happens when there are several possible answers in the recording, which can distract and confuse the listener and lead to wrong answers. Let's look at an example, and the question here is, what date will he leave? So you highlight the key words and you're listening very carefully for the leave date. And the recording goes, we're going to Ireland for a wedding anniversary. When is the anniversary? It's on 13 July. So 13 July is the first date that you hear, and it's very tempting to choose this as your answer. However, as the recording goes on, so I guess you'll need to leave on the 12th or even the 11th. Actually, we're having a family dinner on the 10th, so if there's a flight on the morning of the 10th, yes, we have seats available on the 9:30 flight. Thanks, that's great. So the actual answer here is 10 July, which you can write as 10 July or 10th July. And the 3 distractors are 13th, 12th and 11th. So the tip here is just to stay calm and be patient. Don't write down the first possible answer that you hear, because more likely than not, distractors will be used. So instead, listen carefully to the whole section before you choose your answer. Another mistake is not being aware of the extensive use of synonyms in the IELTS listening test. Synonyms are a type of distractor, and as we all know, synonyms are words with a similar meaning. For example, built, constructed. Let's look at an example from an IELTS past paper, and this is the multiple choice question type. So the instruction is choose the correct answer, A, B or C. And the key words here are the original cars were built by hand, machines or robots. The actual recording says the first vehicles were manufactured manually by workers operating on a moving production line. But these employees were gradually replaced by machines, which were in turn replaced by robots. Let's look at the use of synonyms here in this question. So the question says original cars and the recording says first vehicles. Manufactured is built and by hand manually. So the tips for this type of mistake is highlight the keywords in the questions as you usually do, but don't expect to hear or match them in the recording because of the extensive use of synonyms in the IELTS listening test. Instead, try to think of synonyms for these key words. Let's move on to the next one, number 3, that's losing focus during the listening test. Losing focus or losing your place in the recording is a lot more common than you might think. And the main reason it happens is that students spend way too much time on one particular question. So while they're trying to figure out the answer for this question, the recording has moved on and it's pretty much impossible to catch up. Losing focus can have a negative, even disastrous effect on your band score. I've seen these results in many a practice listening test where students do incredibly well in 3 parts and incredibly badly on another part. So if you're not sure of an answer, stay calm, leave it and just move on. And remember, it's only 1 point. So compared to losing lots of points, don't worry about one question. At the end of the test, when you're filling in your answer sheet, try to remember the recording for the missing answer. And if you can't remember, just make a guess. Never leave any answer blank. There's no penalty for incorrect answers. And number 4 is the mistake of not predicting the answers. This strategy of predicting the answers can have a very positive effect on your overall band score. As we all know, before each part of the test, you have time to read the questions before listening. So use this time to look for the clues in the questions that will enable you to predict the answer. In part 1, it's always completing a form or notes of factual information. So this type of information shouldn't be too difficult to predict. For example, here in number 1, you're looking for a surname. And number 2 will be the name of a road, and number 3 will be the car registration number, and you don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to work that out. You should also try to predict how words will fit grammatically in a sentence. Here, for example, number 13, the something event is always held on Sunday, and 14, the something of taking part has risen to $5 this year. So number 13 is most likely an adjective because it's followed by a noun. And 14 is probably a noun or an adjective plus noun combination because it's preceded by the article the. And the fifth and final mistake is only doing practice tests. Of course, it is essential to practice the IELTS listening test. You need to be familiar with the content of each part and the different question types. However, a constant diet of practice test after practice test can be a little bit boring and even demotivating, especially if you feel you're not making much progress. So combine your practice with listening for enjoyment. Use different sources like podcasts or YouTube videos, etc. with English speaking content. And you got the added bonus of there's no pressure to answer any detailed comprehension questions. When listening for enjoyment, use what's called also active listening. That means while you're listening, you can use it as an opportunity to increase your vocabulary. When you come across new words or phrases, take note of them if you feel they would be useful. And it's an excellent opportunity to familiarize yourself with different English speaking accents and all the different features of pronunciation. So a combination of practice tests, listening for enjoyment using active listening will increase your general listening skills.